God did not create the heavens and the earth. So before you guys throw stones at me, I would like to go into some esoteric teachings. And for those of you who have known me so far and have seen a few of my videos, you guys know that I basically promote or preach or teach something called non-duality. And according to non-duality, there is no separation at all. There is no separation between you, me, the trees, the birds, the plants, the insects, the universe, and of course, God. So, with that being said, I would like to dive a little deeper. And again, please do not throw stones. I am just a messenger. But anyhow, I know many of you guys would say, well, how could this be true? How could God not create the world? And for any of you guys who know anything about psychology, there's something called agency detection. And agency detection is basically a part of our survival mechanism that humans evolved over time to detect threats. So, for example, let's say back in the day, and still this is a useful evolutionary tool because without this tool, many of us may have not survived this long. So basically, agency detection was a tool used for threat detection earlier on in our evolutionary stage, but is still used today. And what agency detection is, according to psychology, when earlier, I guess, primitive man or earlier men, when they went and they walked through the bushes and they saw the bushes maybe rattle or moved or whatever, it was in their best interest to basically assume the worst and not just assume that it was the wind. So, and having this sketchy behavior, if I may say, just like some animals that are extremely sketchy, we have chickens and other animals who are constantly on the lookout. If you see birds, pigeons, or whatever the case may be, they may be eating, but however, at the same time, they're constantly stopping and looking around at their surroundings, looking for threats. Again, this is a sensory mechanism designed to reduce harm and unnecessary danger. So again, so like I said before, earlier men, when they walked in the bushes or they was in the forest or whatever they was doing, gathering food or whatever, and they saw some type of detection that the bush moved, it was in their best interest to assume that it was a predator rather than just be nonchalant about it and take a gamble and basically be eaten by some type of wild beast or some type of wild carnivore, if I may say. So that is what agency detection is all about. However, agency detection goes a lot further than that. Agency detection basically was embedded in our mentality to believe that there is always a cause, and if there's an effect, there is a cause. And also, again, the Buddhists, this is a huge teaching amongst the Buddhists, uh, dependent origination, meaning that no thing exists independently without a cause or some other thing that caused the event or circumstances to happen, which is true. There are causes that or correlations that you could connect to basically every event. So there is no independent event. However, when circumstances are conducive, there may not actually be a need for a creation or a creator, if I may say. So again, because of having this agency detection instilled in us, when we see the world, when we see the earth, when we see anything in the physical world, we tend to say, this thing had to be made. However, that is not necessarily the case because, again, based on circumstances, if circumstances are correct and and conducive, anything is most likely possible to happen without there being a creator involved. And I know this might not be the most evidence for someone who might be a creationist or someone who believes, a materialist or someone who believes in the material world. I know this might sound like very little evidence to say that the world was not created by a God. However, I will dive a lot deeper into this topic as time goes on. However, some of the subject matters, I will say that I will try my very, very best to deliver on such a topic that basically I would say that it is almost next to impossible to actually relate the facts or the truth about the outside world, outside of time and space. Because for any of us who know, when we're talking about God, we're talking about all powerful, all knowing, all sentient, all omniscient, powerful being that existed before time and space. So, again, trying to elaborate or teach or talk about anything outside of time and space, I could only basically give as much metaphors and ideas to basically give you guys an idea of what uh, could have happened, but it's literally basically impossible for anyone in time and space to go outside of time and space and give you guys an answer to what exactly happened. An example of that would be basically like, let's say, a video game. You know, there's a character outside of the video game who's playing the game, and there's the characters inside of the game. You know, whatever the game may be. I usually like to use Sims because Sims is a realistic game, and people work and they eat and they go to school and they do everyday things that the average individual, normal individuals may do. However, the characters in Sims, they are not real, but from their perspective, they think that they are real, but they are not. The only individuals that is real is actually the individual outside of the game playing the game. That is the only individual that is real. However, that individual playing the game sometimes get so immersed in the game that they tend to forget that they are playing a game, and they sometimes become one with the characters of any game. Grand Theft Auto, Sims, any game you could think of. When individuals play a game, they tend to lose themselves and they again become one with the game, forgetting that they are in a different reality. They forget that they're playing a game inside their room or wherever they may be playing this game. However, they tend to just uh, blank out and just go into this non-reality world, this game world, if I may say. And that is exactly what is happening with this illusory world, if I may say. The only true player in this illusion is God. And for those of you guys who have seen my videos, you guys by now should know that when I use the word God, I'm referring to consciousness, because I think, again, the word God is somewhat a very loaded and convoluted word, whereas a lot of misunderstanding, even somewhat baggage, because of the many different beliefs and the many different cultures that use the word God and specifically would say that their God is the only God. And it's pretty much impossible for there to be one God, but everybody, God is the true God. So I try to shy away from the word God. But again, when I use the word God, I am referring to consciousness, because consciousness also has the same characteristics as all powerful, all being, all knowing, and the list goes on, omnipresent, and the list goes on and on and on. So, like I was saying before, the only true character in who's playing the video game is the individual outside of the game, and that individual is the only player who is making the decisions, who is thinking, and whose mind is used. But the Sims character does not have a mind of its own. It does not have a real body per se, because the reality that it lives in is made of code, ones and zeros and whatever else HTML codes that the designers made the game from. And that is the same actual fact that I'm trying to elaborate on today, that this world is also made of code, ones and zeros, and basically information. And we could see this basically, science has also confirmed this. However, I am not a scientist, so again, and nor I am a physicist. So again, it would be extremely difficult for me to basically talk about some of those much more uh, deeper subject matters in reference to physics, such as uh, uh, the I can't remember the experiment. I can't remember the experiment name, but it name right now. But when they basically look at this, look at a particle, if I may say, when a particle is observed and that particle collapses and turns into matter, I think yes, it came to me. It was the double slit experiment. Again, I'm not a scientist, so I can't really elaborate in much great detail. However, that is one of the experiments that would confirm again that we live in an illusory reality. Basically, everything that we see is basically coming into existence once it is being observed. And when it is not being observed, it basically has the potential to be anything or anywhere or something of that sort. Again, I'm not here to claim that I'm a physicist. So, but anyhow, the double slit experiment would be a perfect example of that. So again, so the only true character would be God in this particular, say, in the particular case, expressing itself as the trees, the birds, me, you, whatever you see inside of time, space, reality. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the word time, space, reality, we are just talking about the reality that we see. When you look around, the cars, the houses, your family members, whatever, your cat, your dog, anything that you see in this reality that we consider to be reality is considered time, space, reality. And again, just like time, space, reality, this is like The Sims. We are the characters in this game, playing roles, playing, acting, doing certain things, but we have no comprehension that we are in a game. And again, the only true character inside or outside of the game, if I may say, is consciousness. Consciousness experiencing every experience as the tree, as the birds, as me and you. Consciousness basically expressing itself as everything. And again, the example of that would be the analogy of the video game. All of the characters in the game, the players, the chairs, even the objects that may not be movable, the non-animate objects, they are also made up of the code. There's only one code that the programmer made the game out, but however, the player's character seems to move and they seem to have a lot more activity going on, and they seem to appear that they are separate from the other objects in the game world. However, it is only one code, one program of, again, I don't know, I'm not a programmer, HTML and all that stuff, ones and zeros, but it's only one code expressing itself as many different characters and objects in the game world. And that is exactly what I am here to talk about today. Again, like I said, also being inside of the game world, I too, it is very impossible for me or anyone inside the time space reality to basically give 110% facts about what is going on outside of the game world. Because again, when we look at the character of the game characters that is playing whatever Sims or Mario's or whatever, it is impossible for that character in the game to know what you are doing outside of the game. The game character does not know anything exists outside of the game. The game character does not know you're in your room drinking lemonade, whatever it is you're doing. It doesn't know what clothes you have on. It doesn't know what day it is. It doesn't know anything but the reality it lives in. And that analogy is exactly what I am talking about today. The characters that we are, the dream characters that we are, it is impossible for us to know anything about what is going on outside of reality. And yes, you may have individuals who may have outer body experiences and different things of that sort. However, those, no matter what you do, you are still going to be limited because you are looking at things from a finite mind perspective. It is very impossible for a finite mind to experience the infinite world and vice versa. The infinite finite consciousness mind cannot experience the finite world without a finite mind, and the finite mind cannot experience the infinite world. It's basically each one cannot know the truth about each other. Again, just like when you're playing a game or you're watching a movie, it is mandatory that you basically lose yourself in the game in order to become immersed into the game. It is mandatory that you lose yourself into the movie when you're watching the movie in order to appreciate or have a great appreciation for the actors, the scenes, and so forth. Because if you are constantly aware of the movie, what's going on, you would never really enjoy the movie. You will always be distracted, and so forth and so on. And that is exactly what is going on in reality. We are so immersed into this illusion. And again, I am not saying that the reality, yes, the reality is an illusion. However, your experiences are real. Do not misunderstand what I'm saying and saying that if you fall off a tree or the tree or you get hit by a car, it's going to be an illusion. No, there's going to be consequences. There is consequences. The illusion is real, but the reality, the thing that you consider to be reality, is not real. Just like a magician, when a magician does a card trick or whatever, you guys have seen many shows on TV about, top magicians who basically record and they do all of these fascinating tricks. And the tricks really look real. I mean, you can't tell, what happens, but however, those are actually tricks and illusions. So again, with that being said, the illusion is real, the experience is real, but the reality, the objects, what we see is not real. Which brings me to another point. In reality, the only way there can be experience, there must be what they consider to be a subject and object matter in order to have some type of experience. And when I say subject and object matter, I am talking about myself being a subject and I'm looking into this phone being an object, and I am looking around and I see the trees, I see the water behind me, and so forth and so forth. That is what I'm talking about, subject to object matter. So all reality, there must be a subject matter, a subject and object relationship to experience reality. However, in order for this subject object matter relationship to occur, there needs to be some type of distance between the object and the subject. So with that being said, just like, again, if you take your finger, I'm just giving you an example of what I'm saying. If you take your finger and you put your finger in front of you, there has to be some distance for you to see your finger. But if you move your finger, I want you guys to try this. This is like a small experiment. When you move your finger closer and closer to the eye, you will see it. You will see it, but as soon as it gets to your eye, and when it gets like touching your eye, and then when it kind of basically touches the eye, and it's so close to the eye, it basically disappears. So that is what I'm talking about, subject matter. And I want you guys to try that. Again, once your finger gets so close to the eye, touching the eye, it will literally disappear because there is no distance in between to have the subject object matter relationship to experience reality. And what I'm saying is that that is exactly what consciousness, God, or whatever you choose to call source, had to do in order to experience reality. It had to separate itself from itself and create some type of illusory object, just like the player playing the game. The player is the outside of the game, but it separated itself subconsciously, and it became the player inside the game. It became the character in the game, and that is the only way that the individual playing the game would find some type of pleasure in playing the game, because it had to basically distance itself. It had to distance its mentality, its mind, its reality, and its world, and it had to basically enter this fictitious world and become one with the dream, or sorry, with the dream or the game character, if I may say. And this subject to object situation that I'm talking about is exactly what consciousness, God, had to do in order to be fooled or tricked. It had to basically separate itself and become a subject, which is you and I, and in order to view the world, have the experiences that it has, uh, eating, drinking, walking, talking, whatever experience it had to do, it had to basically, just like the guy outside of the game, what playing the game, or the individuals watching the movie, who had to immerse itself into the game or the movie, and they had to lose themselves. That is exactly what the consciousness, the pure consciousness, God had to do. It had to separate itself. It had to somewhat trick itself into some delusional belief, into believing that it is you, it is me, and it is the trees, and it is the cat. But again, just like the video game, it is only code one code displaying many different subject matters, many different objects, many different scenes. Just like watching a TV. When you look at a TV and you see a TV screen, you see the screen, and then however, when the objects come up on the screen, you see people acting, people playing, whatever the case may be, whatever, but there's nobody really there. It's only the screen uh, projecting these objects onto the eyes, and the eyes, we see the eyes, and we see the light from the objects, and we assume that we are seeing real people, but those characters are not real people. When we see a photo of a friend or a family member or someone else, we tend to say, oh, this is me, this is my mom, this is my cousin, this is my brother. However, the individuals that we see, those individuals are not the photo, those are not the individuals on the screen, those are just pretty much illusory objects, but we tend to say that that is what we are. And which brings me to another point. Please go back and watch. I think the video was You Are the Christ. I'm not quite sure, but I go into much greater detail and reference to the illusory self, according to what the Buddhists call the non-self, and I talk about the five aggregates, how the body and so forth is not self, and I further go into the illusion of the self, the false self, and why. No, I think the topic was why Jesus does not believe in God. I think that was the topic. Yeah, that was the topic. Jesus does not believe in God. And the reason for that is because Jesus knew he was God. He knew there was no separation between himself and the Creator, which was himself as well. And that is what non duality is all about. That is what I preach, and that is what I teach. So, again, I try to get individuals to realize their true self, and then only then that they will be able to uh, appreciate the things that they see, and the things that they would appreciate themselves and see themselves as a more superior being, rather than just based on the creation story, being made of dirt. So, which brings me to the main, again, back to the main topic. God did not create the heavens and earth. When we look at Genesis, we're going to start off with Genesis. There's many creation stories, many creation stories. However, many stories, all of them have some type of void, and some everything coming out of this void, and that is what we're talking about: consciousness, things coming out of this infinite potential called consciousness, and displaying itself, constructing itself, if I may say, as the different separate animate and inanimate objects as well, the rocks, the trees, and so forth and so on. So back to my point, like I was saying before, back to Genesis, we're going to use the Bible because, again, there are many different creation stories. Every different culture has a creation story. It's the Indians, the Hindus, and so forth. And everyone has a creation story. However, there's only a few individuals who do not have a creation story. I would assume, I would say the Buddhist would be one of them, because again, the Buddhist does not believe that there's anything created as well. And so there's only a few religions or a few spiritual teachings that would totally advocate a non-duality construct of the world, which was not necessarily created by a creator. However, there were certain circumstances conducive for the world coming into place. And this particular case, we're talking about a dream state, a dream world, if I may say. And I will go into that a lot deeper as we go on. So again, back to Genesis, using the Bible as an illustration, the Bible says that, and I'm not going to go into the whole chapter. The Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I don't even need to go that far into, all I need to get into is, in the beginning, God created, that is it. I don't need to go into the heavens and earth. I will make another video as time go on. I hopefully will pretty much talk about other subjects in reference to the Bible. So I would start off with basically the first few words, the first 4 or 5 words. In the beginning, God created. So let's look at that from esoteric perspective. So we see in the beginning, which means when you hear the word beginning, obviously it means that there had to be some type of start. And so again, when we're talking about time and space, anything in this world, there had to be a start. But however, outside of time and space, there is no start, there's no beginning, and there's no end, because there is no time. So therefore, when the Bible says in the beginning, we're talking about the beginning of this thing, what we call time, space, or space, time, reality. But again, time, space to be more accurate. So that is the only thing what came into existence in the beginning. There was time, space. However, when you go outside of time, space, there is no such thing as a beginning and an end. That is why consciousness, God, is infinite and also, which brings me to another point. When I use the word infinite, I'm not talking about uh, consciousness of God being uh, having no limits, if I may say. When I use the word infinite, and we're just talking about God or consciousness existing outside of time and space. So when something exists outside of time and space, there is no time to count, no time for something to be infinite or anything of that sort. So again, so back to this creation story. So in the beginning, God created. So when you hear the word created, we let's go back, because in the beginning, God created. I'm jumping the gun. So in the beginning, like I said before, we're talking about the beginning of space time. But however, before space time, there was no beginning. Time began when this creation, or this illusion, if I may say, began. However, so in the beginning, which means that this consciousness, this God, had to exist before time, space, before reality began. So we established that most cultures would agree, everyone would agree on this, that this being, this mind, this God, this consciousness had to exist before time began. So there's usually not a dispute there at all. There's usually agreement, almost 110%, that God, consciousness, or whatever it may be, existed before time existed as well. So back to the scripture. So now we know that in the beginning there was something or someone or a thing or whatever it is you want to call it existed before time, space, the universe, the word, the earth, the world, the trees, the birds, and all of that, and everything else, me, you. Before all of this was created, we know that something existed before that. And that is what I'm talking about today, that thing that existed before everything else. However, like I said before, it is next to impossible for me as a character also in the video game, just like you, just like everybody else, it is next to impossible for me to actually accurately convey the truth, because I could only give you guys ideas, and I could only use metaphors and brief descriptions and allegories to try to explain the unexplainable. Because again, what I am trying to do here is like the character inside of Sims trying to explain what is going on with the player outside of the game. So please understand what I'm trying to convey here is next to impossible. Like I said, yes, you could have dream states and you could go into outer body experiences, but we're still using the finite mind to bring all of these images into this finite world. Once we're in this finite body and we have this finite mind, it is impossible to convey anything outside of this finite reality, because the only thing will be there is silence, if I may say, silence, non-silence. There's because consciousness does not have any, is not separate from anything. It is all the potentials that exist. There is no sound. There's nothing there. There's nothing there to express. That is why a lot of individuals, they have a big problem when it comes to meditation. They don't know what to expect. They want to expect this big, something big is going to happen, this mind explosion. And when they hear about the silent going into the void and all of that, that is pretty much a very difficult concept to grasp, because there is nothing there. That is why when you do go into this space of silence, it is like almost like when you may be trying to stay awake, you might be trying to stay awake late at night or something of the sort, or you might be very tired, and then you fell asleep, and then you woke up and you caught yourself, but you don't realize how long you was asleep. You don't know when you actually fell asleep. You don't know when you took that quick nap. You just were so tired you fell asleep. And that is exactly what going into the void, if I may say, this would be the best example that I could explain what it would be like when they talk about meditation, going into silence and so forth. It is like going into that place, falling asleep, but not being aware when you fell asleep. But when you come out of that aware, that deep state of nothingness, you tend to, there's like a jolt or a jerk. You kind of come to a realization and you say, oh yes, this, I'm back to reality now. I am back to reality. And that is what it is like when I talk about uh, the non the non-reality going into the dream state. That is what it is like. That is what it is like when we talk about going into the dream state. Sorry, the non-self. When we go into deep meditation, there is actually no awareness of anything. So going into this state is like, again, like I said, falling asleep and actually waking back up suddenly when you realize that you fell asleep. That is what it is like, but it's not necessarily a place of awareness. There is no awareness. There is nothing to know. There's nothing to hear. There's no sound. There's no taste. There's nothing there. And that is what it was in the beginning. That is how consciousness was expressing itself, if I may say, in the very beginning. There was no sound. There was no memory of anything to experience. There was no experience of anything for consciousness to be aware of. So that what is exactly what happens when we go into that non-self state that I'm talking about. We tend to go into the void and we go into the blankness. So again, back to this reality, this false reality, what I was talking about. Like I was saying, back to this dream state. There's nothing to be aware of. There's nothing to remember. There's no sound. There's not anything. So therefore, most individuals, they seek to go into this place, but they cannot. They're not aware that there's nothing to be aware of. So again, before the beginning, that is the best example that I could use to say how it was for consciousness in the beginning. There was nothing. There was no sound. There was nothing but the potential for all existence to come into play. So thus far, we have established that in the beginning, there was a being. There was, I should not even say a being, because when I use the word a being, that means that there was something separate from this consciousness and this God. And again, because there was nothing there. So that means that it was only this thing there. There was nothing else, nothing but this thing. And again, even the word consciousness is a word that we came up with to basically describe this nothingness. Again, all words are basically somewhat futile trying to explain the impossible to explain. So that is my point, trying to convey a fact about something that is unconveyable is next to impossible. So with that being said, moving right along. So now we have consciousness being a part of this nothingness, and again, being in the beginning before there was something. So it also states that after, in the beginning, this nothingness created the heavens and earth. And this is now where this in the beginning, God, this nothingness, this consciousness called God, created the heavens and earth. So let's look at the word God, for example, now. So when we look at the word God, we'll see that that uh, God, the word God, is a verb. When we look at the word God, in the beginning, God created, and the original Hebrew word was Elohim, which was a noun and also plural. So in the beginning, God, which is a verb, and which is singular, created the heavens and earth. So what we're talking about here, when I said verb is actions, doing some type of doing thing. That is a verb. Running, jumping, things of that sort. Any type of doing is considered a verb. And as we all know, singular simply just means one thing. So the word God is the doing aspect of this thing we call consciousness, that is nameless, this formless, this boundless thing that we call consciousness. We call that thing God. However, the word God is just simply the the word for that describes the action side of this being we call consciousness. Once again, so the word God is actually not the name of God, is not the name of the entity. According to the Hebrew original text, that word, when we see the word God, that was translated as Elohim. And Elohim is actually, again, a noun which represents names, places, and things of that sort. And it's a being. Noun is a being, and noun is also plural. So when we look at the word again, Elohim, we are talking about something that is plural, not singular, and it is not an action, it is being. So Elohim is actually the being of this God, being uh, plural, more than one. That is why the Bible said in the beginning, let us make man in our image. And many individuals wonder where this R came from. We're talking about more than one God, obviously, one more than one being. As obviously, we're talking about one, and most religious leaders would say we're talking about the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. That's what they would normally refer to when they try to extrapolate some idea who they're talking about when they are referring to God as our, make man in our image. And so, but we're talking basically about a concept of God being both male and female, or having an androgynous nature. And we all know that God is not a physical being, so we're not talking about God being a male and a female. We're basically talking about this God consciousness having male and female energies, if I may say, positive and negative polarities. And this positive and this negative energy is where all creation came from. And if we all know, there's always a male and a female, and there's positive and negative energies. And just like electricity, there's positive and negative energy that creates the flow of current and so forth. So you cannot have a positive without a negative, and vice versa, which also is one of the laws, the hermetic principles, the laws of polarity, positive and negative, male and female. So that's what we're talking about. We're not necessarily talking about God being a male and a female, but we're talking about this energy, this entity, this thing we call God consciousness, having the ability to have an androgynous nature of any sex, having the potential to be anything, and having the ability, the powers to combine to create anything. And so again, so now we see, back to the story again, in the beginning, we have this thing this entity, this consciousness, this thing that existed before the creation of anything. So again, we have this formless being, being existing, self-existing by itself as a being. Again, the word Elohim is a plural, and it is a noun. So Elohim is actually the name of this being, and for many reasons that individuals decided to remove the word Elohim and just place the word God there, because again we live in a patriarch society, and men did not want to evolve, promote, or give the feminine aspect of God any credence. So that is what happened. Men took the word Elohim, which represents the plural nature, the male and female nature of God, and they removed that and they placed it with God. However, most individuals, again, do not know that God is not really the name, that is more of a title. So it is like kind of like you are a runner or you are a swimmer, and then when someone see you, they do not call you John, or they do not call you Bob, or whatever they don't call you, that they call you swimmer, or they call you runner. And most sometimes as nicknames, we tend to do that as well. We tend to call individuals by nicknames, but that is the case what they have done. We have this Elohim, this plural, male and female nature of this thing, this entity, whatever it may be, that we cannot, we again, we can only use words that we have created to describe this thing, but the word God is also a construction, an idea that we came about to label the all knowing, all powerful. However, there is no such thing, if you want to say, as God, because again, these are all words that we have used to try to label something that is which cannot actually be labeled as well. So once again, so now we have again we have the name Elohim, which is a better, much better representation of the energy, the true nature of God, being a noun, which is represents the being of God, being or consciousness being a male and female. So again, so now we have in the beginning a being or an entity or something that only existed, and there was nothing else that existed but this thing existed, and that thing created the heavens and the earth. And which brings me to the next point. Again, created, the word created, when we look at the word created, again, that is also a verb. So we're talking about the word created. When we hear the word created, we think about something as doing, something as a doing object. So that would imply that God, just like when we create a chair, or we create a house, or we create something, we build something, furniture, whatever the case may be, that is what we are implying when we use the word created. We are implying that God created the heavens, the earth, and he took some stuff and whatever he did, and he created these things. However, that is not the case, because when we look at the creation story again, if there was only God and there was nothing else but God, what substance did God use to create this material world? Now we're starting to get involved in conundrums, because we have something what they consider to be, in science, they call the hard problem. And the hard problem is that there's nothing physical could come from, sorry, I apologize. Then the hard problem is there's nothing spiritual, if I may say, uh, non-material cannot come from a material thing. So scientists has a major problem, what they talk about, they call the hard problem. How could the mind, atoms, and all of these physical things, how could all these material, the brain and these physical matter, how could these physical things produce or create something such as consciousness, awareness, and the mind, and so forth and so forth. And that is the problem which scientists has been faced with for some time now. And I don't think they will ever get over that subject until they come to accept the fact that there is no way something material can produce a non-material thing. So again, That is a problem for science, which also brings another problem for the materialists, the individuals who see the world as a material world. How could a non-material being, thing, entity create something that is material? So we have to flip that story around. Again, science has a problem trying to figure out how could something material like the brain create something non-material such as consciousness, thoughts, awareness, and things of that sort, things that are not actually tangible and are not physical in the real world. So that is a problem. So we have to apply that same problem to actually to God and reality and matter as well. How could something non-material create something material? That would be like me trying to say I'm going to create a house out of thoughts, and then uh, you're going to be able to go live in that house and sleep in that house and go and lay in the bed, and you're going to be protected from the elements, the wind, the rain, and so forth by living inside of my thought house. So that is the problem what we are facing also. Nothing physical can produce something non-physical, and also nothing non-physical cannot produce something physical. So with that being said, so if something non-physical such as God consciousness did create something physical, what materials did God's consciousness use to create the physical world? And again, creation would imply that there was some type of building. God used a hammer and a saw and some other tools, and He created things. So that's what the word creation would mean. And I would think a much better word to be used would be manifest. So, how did God manifest? If anything, the world was manifested rather than created, and that would solve the problem that something physical cannot come from something that is non-physical. And then, so when we look at that again, something non-physical something physical coming from something non-physical, what materials again that God used? He had to use non-material things, if I may say. So the non-material things that God did use was thoughts. First, God consciousness had to be aware, and we all know that everything first starts out as a thought, and all creation started with a thought, and that is exactly what happened. God consciousness had a thought, had an idea, or either the vibration frequencies was conducive enough for something to manifest as a elementary particle such as the atom. And that would be the building blocks again that God consciousness had used or created or manifested, which would be the Lego or the building blocks of this illusory creation. So once again, so we can say again that to create something, everything that came into existence first was a thought. Everything was an ideal. And from this perspective, we cannot say that this reality was created from a physical materials, but it would be fair to say that it was created from the thought process of consciousness, and the vibration and the frequency produce something that we would consider to be called an atom. And this atom also is also an integral part in the whole creation story, which I'm not going to talk about right now. But this atom, this also is also a noun, a being which is actually plural, being having the same attributes as God, being everywhere and everything and all powerful, because everything in this universe was made up of atoms, which is similar back to the game code again. Everything in the game being created made up of ones and zeros, and HTML codes and whatever else codes that was used to create the game world. So again, atoms were the building blocks, if I may say, the building blocks like Lego that was used to create the world, and everything was made out of atoms. But again, there first had to be a thought, or at least consciousness was vibrating at a certain frequency with the potential to have this thing called atom. And I'm going for more a scientific, uh, rather than just say the dream and all of that. That is the true case, but I'm just going for a more scientific approach to say that where the materials came from. And we all know that atoms, I shouldn't say we all know, that most of us or many of us may know that atoms, scientists have found out that atoms are basically 99.9% empty, or basically non-existence. And then they break atoms down. I think they go down to quarks and all of that. And I'm not a scientist here again. I'm not a physicist. So I don't know how many, or far they are in breaking down the atom. However, the atom is proven to be pretty much non-existent. So that would further confirm again that the material that the consciousness used to create this illusion was considered to be non-existent as well. And again, this atom also has, it can be singular or it can be plural. One atom could be singular and atoms could be plural. However, it does have the nature of positive and negative, male and female energy, which brings me, I will create probably a video as I go on down in the series. Most likely this will be a series, but I wanted to build the foundation of where how the stories are going to progress. When I go get to these other voices and scriptures in Genesis, we will all know what I'm talking about. So this is like a foundation that I'm going to build everything on. That's going to be the focal point of all of the information that I'm going to relate to you guys as well. So again, this atom is also non-existence, and the whole entire world is made of this thing. Me, you, the trees, the birds, and so forth. So now we see again. So now it further proves that again it's just an illusion, and the only thing that's actually having the experience in this reality is consciousness. And so again, when we look at the atom, we look at the atom. The atom has three parts to us: the electron, the neutron, and electron, neutron. What is the other one now? Electron, neutron, proton. I apologize. Electron, neutron, proton. The electron is the female or the negative aspects of the atom. The proton is the masculine, the negative, the positive aspect of the atom, and the neutron has no charge. So when we get into further down in the scripture, when God talks about He created man, He created the heavens and the earth, He created man, Adam and Eve. When He took a rib from Adam, what He was talking about was that there was something, that was the splitting of the atom. And whoever wrote the Bible, I'm not sure who came up with this knowledge and who had this information, but that individual, whoever did that, was really smart, because they basically was talking about something what they call nuclear fission. I think there's nuclear fusion also, and there's also nuclear fission. Yes, there's nuclear fission and nuclear fusion. I'm not a scientist again, I'm not a physicist, but I think that is correct. However, nuclear fission is talking about splitting of the atom. Then, and I think, again, I'm not a scientist, but I think the process is when they basically shoot some type of particle at the nucleus again, because the atom again, once again, is created of the made up of the electron, the proton, and the neutron, and electron, proton, and a neutron, and the electron being the female negative aspect energy of the atom, and the proton being the positive male aspect of the atom. And again, there's no positive and negative like good and bad. That is just the polarities. Both polarities are just as important. I'm not trying to say the women are negative or the females are negative and the men are positive. That is just the polarities that, again, men came up with. You know what I'm saying? So we know men always have some kind of downplay to this situation. So again, the atom again is made up of the proton, neutron, and electron. So again, when they talk about the Adam and Eve story, God being created Adam and Eve, we're taking the rib from Adam. We're talking about God taking, sorry, not God, but we're talking about nuclear fusion or fission. And whoever created that that Bible knew something about nuclear. They knew about the atom way before the scientists knew about it. And there's also, I think, something in the Bible when they talk about the tribe of Judah being the tribe of light, and that the number of the tribe of Judah also equals to the speed of light also. So that is something also what is actually what was in the Bible that is actually historical, historically known that individuals knew about some of these nuclear fissions and nuclear reactions before scientists ever knew anything about these things as well. So, like I was saying again, when they take a particle and they shoot a particle the uh, at the nucleus, the nucleus I think splits into many different pieces, and that creates a huge energy burst. And so they break up the nucleus into smaller nucleus, and that energy is where atomic bombs come from, nuclear weapon and nuclear energy and all of those nuclear stuff. That is what they're talking about when they're talking about splitting an atom, and that is what the Bible is referring to when they talked about taking a rib from atom, was talking about splitting the atom, not Adam. So Adam was actually talking about atom, the positive, and Eve was talking about atom. That is why God said He made them both male and female, and He made them the same time. There was never a separate male and a separate female. In the very first chapters of Genesis, there was only one creation, male and female, and He called them both Adam, if I remember clearly, and that Adam was referring to atoms. So I hope we could kind of see where I'm going with this. So again, what we have now, we have this illusory world created from this illusory particles called atoms. And then what happens is when they when you take an atom, when you take an atom, and an atom, I think the scientists, they say that when an atom, when the electron, the female aspect of the atom gets excited or is excited, I'm not quite sure how that happens, maybe just through observations, I'm not sure. However, again, once again, for the sixth, seventh time, I'm not a physicist. However, they say that when the electron is excited, the electron releases photons, and photons are what they consider to be particles of light carrying information. So these particles or lights are reflected from the atoms, and so that is what we see when we open our eyes and we see anything, birds, bees, the trees, anything in this reality. All we are seeing is lights. We are seeing one big light show. We are seeing lights being projected onto the eye, and we see those lights, and we think that this light is reality. And the mind perceives this light as reality. Again, it is just one big illusion. So, from an illusory perspective, there was no creation because there is no world to be created, but an illusion in the mind of God, in the mind of consciousness, if I may say. So, there was never anything created, there was no creation per se. Only thing existed is this illusion of consciousness playing I wouldn't say playing a trick, but expressing itself in these many throughout the many with the many using the many vibrations, because we all know that all particles, all matter is just simply atoms vibrating at a certain frequency, and that frequency, all matter has a frequency of vibration, and which is like again the glue, the building blocks, what makes up the chair, what makes up the house, what makes up the car, what makes up the world that we see. So again, the building blocks that the world is made of is actually fictitious as well. An illusory substance that we call atoms are not real. So again, hopefully this will give you guys a much better scientific understanding of what this is going on when we see everything that we see with our eyes, no matter what it is, we see, even looking at your body, it is just atoms projecting light, and the light goes into the eye, and the light goes in the back of the brain, and the images are constructed. So basically, the world that you see, the world that we experience, the body that we see is all constructed in the mind. So what is outside of the mind, I do not know. The thing that we're looking at, I'm not saying that there's nothing there. Obviously there's something there, but that thing is not what you think it is. When you look at the tree, when you look at the car, when you look at yourself, when you look at your body, you think that you're seeing a body or a car or a physical object out there in reality, separate from yourself, but that is not the case. That is an illusion. You are seeing a light being projected from something. I don't know. It's almost like the brain or the mind is like a screen, and there's a projector projecting some type of film onto the mind, and we take that mind, that the projection, for reality. So once again, everything that we see, including the body, is just basically a construction of the mind, constructing elements. So the world is also a construction. So if we get technical about it, God did not create the physical world. You are the creators of the physical world. God did not create your body. You are the creators of your body. God did not create anything because there's nothing to be created but an illusion. Just like a dream. When we go into the dream state and the dream character creates characters, is the characters real, or were they created by anything? No, they were not created by anything. Those were all illusions. So why do you think, if we believe that God could have this, we could have this illusion, and we could have dreams, and they seem real in the dream world, the particles, they feel real too. The same way they feel real here, they feel real. So that is an example of what I'm talking about. Why can't we accept, if we as mere mortal minds and finite minds could have experiences and illusions and play tricks on ourselves? When we take certain drugs, DMT and certain drugs, we see things, we hallucinate, and we can put our lives on it that these things that we see are actually real. However, they are not. So again, in this dream world, when you, for example, I don't know if any guys have had injuries inside a dream, but sometimes individuals have had injuries in dreams, and they actually have woken up and they were actually hurt. They actually felt pain in their arm, they felt pain inside their leg, wherever objects was hit, and part of their bodies was hit in the object, they felt that in the waking state. So which would say that, why that if we could have all of these realistic illusions, why can't God, the creator, have all of these realistic illusions times 1,000, times 1,000,000, times 7 billion, in this particular case being 7+ billion people in the world? God has no limit. So consciousness has no limit. We are just pretty much projecting our limited minds onto the reality again, from this agency detection perspective, saying that because we see something, there must be a creator. We do not understand that everything that we see was never created. Everything that we see is an illusion that was constructed by the brain, by the mind. Everything, the things that we hold on so tight and so dearly, is illusions that we would fight for, we would kill for. Everything that we fight for is just basically illusions. That is why, again, in my other video, I talked a lot about, I can't remember which video it was, uh, you are the Christ, I think. Oh no, God, Jesus does not believe in God. Go and see that. Again, I talked about Plato's cave, and that is exactly what is going on. We are in some type of something is out there. I am not saying there is nothing out there. There is something out there, outside of, outside there, somewhere out there, there's something, but what it is, I do not know. I do not know, and no one really knows, because again, all we are seeing is the light. All we are seeing is the light, and that light vibrating, those photons vibrating at a certain speed, at a certain rate, producing a certain frequency. That is why they said God is light. Also, God is light because, again, this light, everything is created from light. It is just, again, one big light show. And if we want to look at, again, from the creation perspective, throughout history, all of the gods had a male and a female aspect to it. Again, the positive and negative polarity. However, recently, men have just pretty much, patriarch men have decided to remove the female aspect from God, and that is what they have done. But again, if you even look at the atom, and like I said, it is the electron that gives off the light, that gives us the illusion of the things that we perceive to be real. And the electron also is the female aspect of God consciousness. So you see, even the female, in from an atomic perspective, is the producer of reality and producer of the things that we see by giving off the photons. And so therefore, which is why all creation stories in most cases depict God as a female, Mother Gaia, Mother Earth is a female, and Eve being the female of all humanity, and Mary being the mother of Christos, Jesus, Joshua, and Devaki, and all of those, Krishna, and all of those had some female entity that was the producer of mankind and gods as well. So again, I hope this video is making clear that everything you see, there's nothing that you see, it seems real, it really feels real, it feels so real. And that is the part of delusion that we're supposed to get out of, is to come to a realization that this is an illusion, but it's not real. And for those of you, I have a video also talks about, oh, will wet dreams ever stop? That is another video that I have out there, Will Where Dreams Ever Stop? And I talk about having nocturnal emissions, and that would be a perfect example to say how if dreams could be so real, uh, dreams are just another, they are just as real as the waking state. The dream state is just another experience, a transition from one reality to the next. The waking state is not less real than the dream state. All of it is real. So, like I was saying again, when you look at the dream state, when we have again men who have had wet dreams, you see, you could have a dream whereas you had intercourse with a female. You had intercourse with a female, and you actually was enjoying yourself so much, you actually had an orgasm. You actually wet yourself up. And I mean, it happens to me too. I'm not saying, I'm just saying because I practice the semen retention and I practice the sacred secretion. And so I have went 6 years plus, going on 7 years straight, no sex, no masturbation. So I sometimes, these things occur, also wet dreams and so forth, when I get too overly excited from being too close in the real world, participating in too much non-sexual activity, but that's coming too close into to having sex, but the body needs to express itself one way, shape, or form or another. However, again, if a male could have a dream and have sex, and in this dream, and then also have an orgasm, that should tell you how powerful the dream state is. So, with that being said, I'm going to wrap this up video up very soon, coming close to the end. Everything we see, every single thing that we see, is an illusion, including you, including me. It is just the five senses processing everything and projecting everything, and it appears to be real. However, it is not. And one final fact that I remembered was esoteric teaching. Esoteric teaching talks about a reality. I think it's an Egyptian teaching. A sigil, I think is, I can't remember what sigil it is. But anyhow, the moral of the story is the sigil shows that everything that we see comes into the eye, comes in through the eye, and then it is processed by the right brain, processes everything. Science may not necessarily agree with this, but again, this is some ancient history in reference to reality as well. So we have the right brain. When we look at the forest per se, we see all of the trees, we see all the forest as one, and that image also moves to the left side of the brain, and the left side of the brain breaks it down, and that allows us to see single individuals, single trees, single objects as well. So with that being said, the goal is to come to the realization that this is a dream world we are living in. Please do not get too attached trying to fight, ride, or die for anything. Money, anything that you see, it is all an illusion. Not saying that we should not take anything serious, or we should appreciate anything, or we should not love anyone. That is what we should do, because that is the goal of life, is to love thy neighbor as thyself. However, once again, do not take anything literal, because it is all just a dream, just an illusion, and the goal is to wake up one day It may not be in this lifetime, it may be in the next lifetime, or even the next or the next. However, at some point, there will be an awakening. And when we lose this grip, when reality loses its grip, life will become a lot more fuller. We'll have more freedom to laugh and live and enjoy things. And when the hard times, when the bad times come, yes, the experience is real. Yes, we will go through some pain and suffering. But however, just know that it's not permanent and it is not a fixed situation and it is actually not real as well. I know it may sound like, difficult, it might sound easier said than done, but that is the facts. In fact, scientists, like I said, also have also stated that the reality that we see is not real. However, coming to this realization is not just something that you're going to do overnight. However, it does require some retrospection, meditation, self evaluation, self contemplation, and a lot of self work. That's all it comes down to: self. That is why they say, know thyself. So, with that being said, despite the fact this is an illusion, I would like for you guys to click on that illusionary subscription button, click on that illusionary like button, and that illusionary share button as well. So, with that being said, I would like to end on a positive astrological note. May the stars shine brightly on you always, and may the planets work in your favor always as well. Triple P, and I'm out.
Oh.